Good morning, all. Thank you for being with us today. We're excited to bring you a new resource that we believe will be quite helpful, that we wanted to kind of take a proactive stance on the monies that are coming down from the stimulus. So thank you for being with us. This is an opportunity for us to share with you this new resource, but also for you to have an opportunity to actually have a little bit of input and make sure that it is something that we can truly use, and that's something that you, especially folks at the institution level, can find very helpful. Next slide, Dale. So for those of you who don't know, we are the Southern Regional Education Board. We are an interstate compact, and our focus is, in fact, our charge and the whole reason we exist is to support our states in increasing the economy of the states through education. The things that we do well is we analyze and publish information, we bring people together and engage them in those conversations, and then we support action. What we're going to share with you today is a good example of the first two of these, but we hope that we're able to come and help you in supporting the action beyond that as well. Dale? So, we're in the year of the asterisks. I mean, we've had all sorts of other years, but we can talk about COVID. We can use the word unprecedented, which I think is probably in law somewhere that you have to say that at least once on every webinar now. But I've sort of just started calling it the year of the asterisks. The things that have really challenged us, we have some opportunity to look at things differently, but it means that we have to think differently. So we have to shore up some gaps that were left from COVID-19. We talk a lot, especially in K-12, there's been this idea of what some people are calling lost learning. At SREB, we're talking about unfinished learning. We're talking about the fact that there was a major disruption, but fact is you can't really lose what you didn't have to start with. But as much as we talk about this in K-12, this is also an issue when we talk about post-secondary. We can't pretend that post-secondary folks didn't have some unfinished learning or that it impacted how they learn. The other part of the challenge here is the design is how we design education in a post-pandemic future. The pandemic affected us all in so many ways in education, but it also impacted how the workforce is going to really react to this. As we continue in this fourth industrial revolution and we see how our workforce is becoming more reliant on automation and on artificial intelligence, and really so much of our workforce is going to be STEM related, we've got to think about how do we catch folks up, but also how do we redesign what we're doing to make it a more powerful entity. Dale? So, maximizing the effective use of these funds. Now, the human nature. Now, when I was a kid, and my grandparents would give me $1. I'm probably dating myself here, but there was a store near where they lived that it was a dime store, and they would give me $1, and of course my parents were like, maybe you should take that $1 home and keep it. Well, man, I couldn't wait. I had to go spend it, and I was going to go find me the coolest toy. It was usually going to be some kind of either some type of car, or it was going to be some type of superhero. And so I was going to go spend that money, and I wouldn't always pause and give thought to how should I spend this money in a better way. And you may be going, well, it's a bad example, Stephen, because you were a kid. True, but here's the reality. We've got all of these funds in these 6 boxes that you see that's coming to us, and we feel a sense of responsibility that we need to spend this money. We also feel a sense of urgency because we know that there's also time limit on these dollars. So a lot of people, I've read a lot of things over the last several months, especially since the last COVID bill was passed, of what people should spend it on. SREB is taking a little bit different tack. We're not here to tell you, here's what to spend it on. We would rather really push on the idea that we need to be thoughtful and strategic about how we spend this money, even though it will take a little bit longer to make some decisions. Those are going to be better decisions for the long run. Dale? So we did a document, it's on our website, about the funding. It's an analysis of funding by state. It provides a summary of the guidelines. You know, about 20% of these funds can be used for unfinished learning. There's all sorts of dynamics here. But what we really hope that everybody does, whether you're in K-12 or post-secondary, is that rather than launching into just spending funds, stop, think, plan, because we've seen some, now we've not seen money on this scale before, but after the Great Recession, we did see a big influx of money. And we saw some people who did some great things with it, but we also saw, to be perfectly honest and blunt, where people made some really serious errors. For instance, making decisions that once that stimulus money went away, they no longer had that funding, and they had to make some further decisions that really hurt morale. So thinking about this over a period of time is going to be really critical. Next slide. Now, these are more in the K-12 realm, but I'm going to share them with you anyway. We did a survey just to hear from educators about what was happening. The parallel, I think, to this in post-secondary is really around some of the results that we got. You know, here we asked schools how they're going to prepare students for this year's assessments. And look at the biggest thing. They're incorporating strategies used in previous years. I bet if you do a similar poll in post-secondary, we're going to see that as well. That we rely on the things that we're comfortable with, the things that we think have worked in the past. But as a general rule, we always have to be rethinking what we're doing, but also recognizing, folks, there's some stuff we've done that we think might have been good, but we know it wasn't. We know that we still have a tremendous achievement gap, and we have people who are still not being served. Next slide, Dale. You know, here we looked at the state assessments and how will schools determine the learning needs for the fall. There's a greater reliance on formative assessment. There's greater reliance on using teacher evaluations, teacher evaluations of students, that is. Where this, I think, is important in post-secondary is how much conversation is going on with faculty around them doing the evaluation. Now, I know it's hard if you've got a 300-seat auditorium and you're having to deal with class that way. How are you using your grad assistants? How are you using other resources at your disposal to really help determine whether these students are prepared academically, but also from a social and emotional standpoint? Dale? So what this guide is about the biggest need for your school. Here's a wordle of different things that we heard as we did our survey. Notice the thing that's biggest is students. What I want to really encourage you on is that, and as we go through today and we share this with you more, please remember that the whole point of this is not to tell you you should spend it on any particular thing, but it's that it's a guideline or a framework, if you will, that can help you and your leadership team sit at a table and go through a process of how you would make decisions about priorities, how you would align the funding systems to support those priorities, and how you would think about it in a future tense and not an immediate. While we do have immediate needs, we can't afford to do things with this money that simply won't be sustainable when it's gone. We know that education, unfortunately, has kind of had a history of that. So now is an opportunity for us to look at this differently and think about it differently. With that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Stevie Lawrence, to walk us through the next part of the conversation.
Good morning, everyone. So as Stephen has already alluded to, SREB's focus in this recovery planning process is to provide a direction and sort of a roadmap to leaders in both K-12 and post-secondary education to address immediate needs that districts or schools might have relating to how they emerge after the pandemic and how those things related to what may be needed in the long term that long-term planning aspect can be taken in consideration as these leaders make decisions about how they use these funds to impact student performance, student accessibility, and overall viability of campuses, schools, and districts. Dale? So we've thought about this particular document in 3 phases. Phase 1, we want to focus somewhat on immediate needs and how those needs push innovation at the school district level, at the district level, and throughout post-secondary institutions. Also, phase 2 is focusing on how well the planning aspect for the use of these funds promote learning, health and safety, and greater development in infrastructure, sustainability. And thirdly, how will we determine the efficacy and effectiveness of how well these funds have been used moving forward? To help guide us, next slide. To help guide us this morning on answering some of these questions, we've called upon one of our colleagues in the UNC system, who is Dr. Constance Millett. She serves as the Vice Chancellor for Finance and Administration at Winston-Salem State University. To introduce Ms. Millett to you this morning, as I said, she's Vice Chancellor for Finance and Administration at Winston-Salem State. In her role, she has administrative oversight for financial planning and budget, financial services, business, auxiliary services, human resource, and facilities management. Welcome, Vice Chancellor Millett.
Thank you very much. We certainly do appreciate the welcome and the opportunity to speak with you all today.
Thank you. So to help us gain a better understanding of how institutions, particularly higher education institutions, can effectively use these funds, how would you say state agency districts or institutions can respond to immediate needs? Will this response promote, how can this response promote innovation in the long run and not allowing institutions to return to what they've been doing before?
Exactly. Okay, so very great question. So what I would like to do is just kind of walk you through Winston-Salem State University's approach to COVID. So in March of 2020, I think we took the same stance as so many other institutions took. And back to one of Stephen's words that's now written in absolute law when we have conversations around COVID, it was unprecedented. So along with unprecedented, we had to go into an abundance of caution around life safety issues and life safety measures. So we made an immediate pivot to make sure that we allowed students to return home. And those that were unable to return home, we were able to house them here on campus. We were able to work with our faculty members to ensure that they were ready to move into a virtual instructional delivery modality. We had all of our primary staff members also to leave campus, to pivot away from campus as we work through what their remote work would look like. So immediately, out of an abundance of caution, we basically cleared the campus unless individuals were considered essential employees. And so from that, we began to strategize and work through what will our new normal look like? What does this mean given this current environment? And all of these conversations took place prior to receiving any type of funding. So initially, funding was not the primary concern. Again, it was around the life safety perspectives. And so with that, we began staying very in tune with what the CDC was saying, the various precautions one should take. And we began working with our students to make sure that, one, they had the tools that they need in order to continue their instructional delivery. For students that did not have computers, we were able to FedEx computers or hotspots to them, whatever their particular needs were. We also work with our staff and faculty to make sure that whatever technology needs that they required, that we were able to provide those. And so again, all these things were taking place before funding was received from the before the federal funding was received. And so it was to our absolute pleasure and delight that we did receive these dollars so that we could begin to plan appropriately and continue to meet the needs of the campus community. And so again, we issued laptops, hotspots, whatever particular was needed. And then we began to work with our staff members to assess what their particular needs were to allow them to work in a remote environment. And so we have to think back to, let's say, February 2020. We were accustomed to coming into our office, picking up our mail, answering our telephones, greeting customers. So we weren't thinking about how do we live in this space when you can't work that way. And so we quickly had to think about, well, how do we get phones answered? How do we still service our students? We were able to engage our technology group to talk through what type of technology we would need to allow individuals to answer phones remotely and to set up Zoom meetings and sessions with students, because again, we wanted to ensure that the student success was at the forefront of our delivery. And so the federal dollars and the other state dollars that we received allowed us to move into that. And along with that, we had to continue to be very innovative as we move down this pipeline to ensure that needs were being met to the best of our ability. Again, this was new to everyone. We probably could have done some things differently, but we did the best we could with the information that we had at that time.
Thank you. How, as a second part of that question, how, with all of your planning at the institutional level and moving forward, we're in COVID now, almost over a year, How do you think that planning will contribute to further innovation?
Oh, absolutely. So a couple of things that we did in terms of governance structure. We put together an incident policy team, and that incident policy team not only looked at the needs of what we needed right now and at that point in time, but how do we look going forward? What does this new normal look like? Because there's no more status quo. Status quo pre-COVID was then. We're under new status quo. And so the new status quo contains a lot of hybrid. You know, it's around hybrid learning modalities, hybrid work, remote opportunities, and how do we live in that space? And so we're also looking at how do we increase our online programming opportunities? Again, not just for today, but how do we look 5, 10 years down the road in this space? And so this has provided us an opportunity to be very innovative around online planning, online sessions, online service, because as we talk about distance learning and distance programming, we also have to ensure that we're wrapping around that the appropriate services that a student would need to be successful, because we're still staying on our primary mission of student success. And student success to Winston-Salem State is so much more than just from an academic standpoint. We have to look at how do we service our particular population that comes to us with a variety of additional needs outside of their primary academic needs. And so it's important to us that we're able to continue the appropriate conversations and the appropriate relationships to make sure that all those student needs are being met. And so we're doing lots of things from a virtual hybrid perspective to make sure that we're connecting with the students on an ongoing basis.
Sure, thank you. How is your institution, and you've hit on this a little bit, focusing heavily on learning, health and safety, and infrastructure improvements in the long term relative to sustainability needs?
Yeah, so what we've done, again, in terms of the learning, we've done a lot around technology. So our technology infrastructure has changed a great deal to ensure that we're able to meet the needs in that space. One of the other areas that we're spending a lot of conversation and a lot of time in is managing the mental health component of this. We're having a great deal of conversation from a mental health perspective. How do we manage this going forward? Because we have to realize that a lot of people will struggle with what I'm going to call a form of PTSD as it relates to their individual impact of COVID. And this is not only one population of our community, we're looking at our students, staff, and faculty, because our faculty members struggled with, how do I go back into the classroom? How do I interact with the students? How do I engage? And so we have to remember that this is real, that we're talking about individuals. We're not talking about things, we're talking about people, and how do we meet them at their particular needs. And so we're doing a lot of things around managing the mental health aspect. We're also working with various groups in our community to assist us with COVID testing, which will be ongoing, as well as we're running a vaccination clinic here on campus to provide not only the needs for our immediate on-campus community, but for our local city community as well. And so we will continue to do those things, as well as the standard PPE. We will continue to distribute that. We will continue to have conversations around social distancing and building social distancing into our non-academic programming, because we want to ensure that our students are still able to have that cultural experience that many students look forward to, particularly at an HBCU. That's part of the culture that we build. And so as we look at growing our virtual space, how do we grow that with the cultural aspect that we want the student to have as the experience? One of the things that we proudly say here at Winston-Salem State is that we are a family. That when you come here, you're not just a student, you're not just a member of the university, but you're part of this great big RAM family that we take great pride in. And so we're working very diligent to see, how do we build that into this new normal that we are walking into, and where we will remain for quite some time.
Thank you. And finally, given thought to all that you've highlighted so far, how does your institution and other institutions that you may collaborate with within your system, how are you making plans for monitoring your efforts and the planning that you've done so far, and efficacy for the interventions that you've planned around the use of these funds and creating a new environment for your campus? So how will you think about monitoring that?
Yes, so we will continue with all the efforts that we have in place currently. That will continue. And we recognize and realize that individuals are suffering, as we all are, from COVID fatigue. And we want to be able to get out and be able to socialize. And so again, as we develop our non-academic program, our cultural type program, we're making sure that we're taking into account the social distancing, the numbers that are involved, and how do we provide PPE to these particular groups for the programming that they want to have. So we will continue those efforts. The way in which we have managed athletic programs and athletic events, that will be different. We have mobile temperature gauges that we will use throughout as we have various programs and various events on campus, just to continue to ensure that the safety measures are in place. We will continue and encourage the testing, as well as the vaccination clinics that we have going on. So those things will continue.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your input and your insight into what Winston-Salem State is doing around these viewpoints for using these funds to support student success and developing a stronger campus climate during these unprecedented times. that are as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Dale, can we go to the next slide? So before we go into our breakout sessions this morning, I do want to make sure that those that have joined us on the call are aware of some preliminary work that SREB conducted related to the pandemic. We put together 2 playbooks. One that may be of particular interest to this group is our higher education playbook, and those can be found on our website. In essence, the playbook was put together with the input of a task force of 42 members, 42 folks from our 16 member states. And those individuals serve in various capacities at colleges and universities, as well as other important roles within our states to help think about what are the issues that post-secondary institutions may be grappling with at the onset of COVID, and what are those issues that campuses may be grappling with in the midpoint where we are now with COVID, and then how can we emerge as a stronger and more sufficient campus even after grappling with many of the issues that COVID has presented to post-secondary and higher education. So this playbook is a great tool to think about some of the things that Vice Chancellor Millett indicated, such as governance and legal and structures that could be redeveloped or redefined, as well as health and safety issues to help make decisions around how to support campus and student safety, as well as inputting the proper student support mechanisms for our students as they are working remotely or in hybrid formats. So this is a great tool as you continue to chart your way forward and become even more innovative in the higher education space. Next slide. Our next portion this morning, our participants will be put into 4 breakout rooms, and you'll have an opportunity to react to and provide insight for how SREB has begun to put together this recovery plan relative to the funds to support higher education recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. This is what makes this particular exercise of this session so valuable, as we would like to hear from you as we are developing this tool, because that firsthand knowledge and input is what we value most. All right, and so in your breakout rooms, groups and those in these groups will be able to access what are called the Jamboard to review the sessions of the recovery plan and to provide your input there. And there's the link. And there will be a timer for independent review. And we will have an opportunity to look at other pieces of the plan, and you will be able to provide your input there. And we will take that input and begin to revise and develop our final draft.
All right. So when we go into your breakouts in just a second and you review the different components, we're going to ask you to help us think through some of the priority actions that institutions should prioritize, actions that they should look at. We're going to think about resources and tools, and then we're going to look at cautions or questions. So we're going to move into our breakout rooms right now. You'll get a prompt to move you to an open room. And so you, when that comes up, if you'll click it, it'll move you in, and we'll be in there for at least, we'll probably be in there about 15 to 20 minutes. We'll do a little check in a few minutes to see how everyone's coming along. So if we can move now. Are we back?
Thank you all for your hard work in your groups, and welcome back to the main room. Dale, I'll pass it to you.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for your feedback. We will be reviewing that as a team, and we'll utilize the information that you shared with us to continue to update our recovery planning guidance. And we encourage you to continue to go to our website to look at that. We'll draw your attention once again, as you see on the right-hand side of the recovery guidance plan is that document that we talked about earlier that our Office of State Strategies developed, which I think is a great summary of the 3 rounds of funding, shares with you the amounts and also some important timelines. So I encourage you to go to that website. You see it here. It provides great summary. It tells around timelines for obligating and awarding the funds and the major differences between the various iterations of each education fund. Again, I want to thank you. I want to see if Dr. Lawrence has any parting words, or Dr. Pruitt.
I'd just like to simply again thank everyone for joining this webinar this morning. We hope that it has been helpful for you as you think about planning for your campus or your state. And we certainly hope that you will use the completed guide as you move forward with making decisions about next steps for your campus during this time. Thank you very much.
And for me, I'll just say, we just continue to try to find ways to support our colleges and institutions. So, I just invite everybody on this call or anybody you talk to, SREB is committed to supporting post-secondary, and we want to find the best way to do that. And we recognize all of you are different, and there's something different about each individual institution and as well as each individual state. But what we want to try to do is find some ways that we can really bring people together to have some great conversations. So I appreciate all of you being here with us today. I hope that you got good things out of it. We will continue to be reaching out. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Steve.